Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
Amalia was once again barely holding back tears. She believed, once again, that everything would be fine. But Iris and her daughter Margarita, they would once again portray Amalia in front of her father as a foolish, spoiled girl going through a difficult, awkward age. Of course, I knew that puberty is a difficult period. Iris rolled her eyes dramatically in front of her upset husband, but this. Amalia is heading downhill somewhere. If only you knew what efforts it takes for me to keep her in check. With Rita, it was never like this. I know that you do a lot for Amalia, and I appreciate you for that. The father spoke, lowering his gaze to the floor. He was ashamed of his daughter, ashamed of her supposed misconduct, and what was most insulting was that explaining things to him was useless. Amalia had tried many times to convey to her father that Iris constantly vilified her. When her father wasn't home, her stepmother belittled her, bombarding her with endless tasks, not allowing her to study, see friends, or pursue her hobbies. But Iris was a virtuoso in manipulating people and a wonderful actress to boot. She always managed to turn her father against her daughter. She chose her words so carefully that after them, all of Amalia's explanations and arguments seemed like pitiful excuses and attempts to discredit a saintly woman who was raising someone else's difficult child. So now, Amalia wouldn't even attempt to prove to her father that she was not to blame. It would lead to nothing. The girl sat on her bed, huddled in the corner, burying her face in a huge teddy bear. Senor Saiz, her grandmother's neighbor, had given it to her as a gift. Amalia had just turned 7 at the time. She had been so thrilled to see the neighbor with the huge toy in his hands. Oh, it had been such a wonderful time. How she wished she could go back. Thinking of her grandmother, Amalia smiled. Yes, the girl longed infinitely for her relative who had loved her and accepted her completely. Her grandmother had surrounded her with warmth and care, talked to her often, and hugged her. But she hadn't been there with Amalia for almost 5 years now. Vera's grandmother had passed away when the girl turned 10, and since then, Amalia's life had changed drastically and not for the better. But her childhood had been simply wonderful. Despite not knowing her own mother, she had felt quite happy under her grandmother's wing. Amalia's mother had died shortly after giving birth to her first and only long-awaited child. Some unforeseen complications after childbirth, and the doctors couldn't do anything. So there was Leonardo, Amalia's father, holding the newborn in his arms. He loved his wife very much and couldn't come to terms with her loss for a long time. Leonardo had no idea what to do with a newborn child. He was even afraid to hold his daughter. It was fortunate that his mother was there during this difficult time. She took Amalia upon herself, which was a great relief for her bewildered son, who was completely absorbed in his own grief. At first, the grandmother lived in the city apartment of the orphaned family. Amalia's mother had no parents. They died when she was still a student. Leonardo, on the other hand, worked as a ship mechanic on a fishing vessel and often went on voyages. Besides, he didn't have a strong desire to take care of a baby, so Amalia ended up under her grandmother's full care. Initially, the grandmother tried to mend the relationship between her daughter and the father. She wanted Leonardo to take care of the child himself. It's not that it was difficult for the grandmother, no, it was just the right thing to do. But the man didn't want to hear anything. He was consumed by grief and blamed his daughter for what had happened to his beloved wife. Amalia only figured this out later when she grew older. For a long time, the father believed that they would be better off without children, that they should travel, give all their attention to each other, and be happy. Leonardo was deeply in love with his young and beautiful wife and mourned her loss for a long time. In the end, the grandmother grew tired of being the intermediary between Leonardo and Amalia. She had longed for her homeland, a cozy house with a green roof in the village. Besides, she had a lot to do there, a garden, chickens, cats, and a dog. Neighbor Senor Saiz looked after all this when the grandmother was away. They had a good and warm relationship, of course. The grandmother had even entrusted him with Amalia. but one must know their limits. Convinced that she couldn't reach her grown son, the grandmother took little Amalia with her and went home. Leonardo was only too happy with this turn of events. The baby clearly irritated him, and her mere presence reminded him of the tragedy. Besides, he had to leave on a long voyage soon, which also pleased him. The waves, camaraderie with colleagues, and hard physical labor, he hoped it would help him distract himself from his heavy thoughts. In part, by the way, it did. With her characteristic energy, the grandmother got involved in taking care of her little granddaughter. Diapers, vests, stroller walks, she once again felt like a young mother, only this time she fully enjoyed motherhood. When her own son Leonardo was a baby, the woman hadn't realized what a blessing a child was. She had had to deal with a whole bunch of responsibilities, setting up a household in a small village house, continuing her education at the local college, and working part-time. Times were tough back then. Now, the elderly woman devoted all her time, attention, and warmth to Amalia. Looking at the girl, she felt a mixture of poignant tenderness and sharp pity. How could it be otherwise? Such a tiny thing, and already without a mother. Moreover, it seemed that her father wasn't eager to take care of his daughter. Her son's behavior greatly upset the caring grandmother, but she hoped she could fix everything. Amalia was growing up as an adorable and trouble-free child. She rarely got sick and did everything on time, sat up, walked, and started talking. The grandmother couldn't have been happier with her. The girl was growing up, surrounded by friendly people emitting warmth and acceptance. First and foremost, of course, was her grandmother. She was, without a doubt, the most important person in Amalia's life. Reliable, caring, kind, always understanding, always supportive. She opened the world to her granddaughter, talked to her about everything under the sun, explained complex things to the little girl. Amalia couldn't remember a single time when her grandmother brushed off her questions. How it usually happens with adults. You won't understand yet. You'll find out when you grow up. Go away, I'm busy right now. There was never anything like that between the grandmother and Amalia. They seemed to understand each other without words. And there were also the grandmother's friends and neighbors. They, too, played a role in Amalia's upbringing. The girl visited them, befriended their grandchildren. Sometimes, a group of children would run from house to house, having breakfast somewhere, having lunch somewhere else, and watching TV together in yet another place. Someone's father would take the whole company for a trip to the river or the forest. It was so much fun. Amalia developed a particularly warm relationship with Senor Saiz. His house was opposite her grandmother's, and the elderly man often came to help her with household chores requiring a man's touch, fixing a faucet, repairing the barn roof, moving a cupboard. In return, the grandmother fed him delicious pastries and treated him to aromatic cutlets. Senor Saiz, however, was a widower. When Amalia first heard this strange word, she furrowed her brow thoughtfully, trying to understand what it meant. Of course, her grandmother explained it to her. There was no one else to bake pastries for the neighbor. Naturally, the man managed cooking just fine and didn't go hungry, but he never learned the art of baking. It was only later that Amalia realized that perhaps the neighbor had more than just friendly feelings for her grandmother. Why not? He was a widower, neighbor's husband had passed away a long time ago, but her grandmother. Perhaps she had decided to dedicate her entire life to her granddaughter, not getting distracted by anything else. The elderly woman had big plans for Amalia's future. She spent a lot of time with the girl, poured her heart and soul into her, and believed that she would be with her granddaughter for a long time. She would educate her, get her married, and even help with great-grandchildren. It didn't work out. Thanks to her grandmother, Amalia had the warmest memories of her childhood. She especially loved the summer. That was the truly carefree and joyful period. For holidays, Amalia's cousins from the city, Christina and Marina, came to visit Senor Saiz. They were Amalia's best friends. She eagerly looked forward to their visits all year long. The girls spent entire days together, never parting. They never got bored as a trio, but they also enjoyed spending time with other village kids. They rode bicycles, went to the river and the forest, played hide and seek and tag, told scary stories in the evenings, and played soccer barefoot. They returned home tired, dirty, but happy. Often, the gang of children would spend the night at Amalia's grandmother's house. She never turned down her granddaughter's request to let someone stay overnight. There was enough space in the house. The children chatted and giggled all night, but the grandmother didn't mind. She understood how fun and wonderful it was. Of course, Amalia realized early on that she didn't live like other children. Others had mothers. Not everyone had fathers, but mothers were always there for their children, and fathers too, in some cases. Naturally, Amalia started asking her grandmother questions. So, the woman had to carefully and gently tell the girl the story of her birth. Amalia didn't know her mother, so she wasn't too upset. Moreover, her grandmother told her that her mother was now in heaven and helping her daughter from there. It sounded like a beautiful fairy tale. But from time to time, the longing for something beautiful and unattainable squeezed the child's heart. Amalia sometimes imagined what it would be like to live through various moments in life if her mother were there. However, these thoughts didn't particularly trouble the girl as long as she lived with her grandmother. Amalia felt warm, cozy, and content there. Her father, of course, occasionally visited his mother. He always came with gifts, especially on Amalia's birthday, if he wasn't away on a voyage. He also visited them at least once every 2 months. For Amalia, he was a familiar and familial yet practically a stranger. A handsome man with sad gray eyes. Always well-groomed, always well-dressed. He arrived with gifts, beautiful dolls, fancy dresses, and interesting books. Amalia wondered, how did her father always manage to guess so accurately what she dreamed of? Could he really read her thoughts? Later, the girl understood that it was her grandmother who told her son what to buy for Amalia in the city. Her father usually stayed for a couple of days, less frequently for a week or two. He didn't know what to talk about with his daughter, asking routine questions about her studies, friends, and hobbies. The girl could see that he wasn't particularly interested in any of it. Not like Senor Saiz. He loved listening to Amalia's stories about the adventures of the village children, laughed, recalled episodes from his own childhood, and offered valuable advice without imposing it. The elderly neighbor was simply a wonderful listener. But her father, he asked only because it was necessary. Amalia understood this, even when she was a very young child. She desperately wanted to impress her dad, to pique his interest in something, to make him happy in the end, but it was in vain. All of Amalia's attempts were met with indifference from this man. He diligently fulfilled his fatherly and son-like duties, transferred money to her mother, and bought necessary household items. When he visited, he took care of the garden and did repairs. But her father did all of this out of a sense of duty. There was never any emotional connection between him and his daughter. Her grandmother tried to educate her son, explaining to him how to behave with his daughter. The adults thought that Amalia was asleep, but she heard everything. A girl needs her father's attention, her mother whispered to her son. She's growing up. Come to visit more often, take her out, or go on vacation together. Show her the capital, show her the sea. You know, Mom, I work a lot, I'm constantly on trips, earning money. Besides, it's for Amalia's future, her son replied. But you often forget about the present, her grandmother sighed sadly. I don't forget, no. I see it. I see how well you're taking care of her. Amalia is happy with you. Well, what can I give her? I'm still dealing with my own tangled emotions. Even though Amalia was still very young, she understood that her father was burdened by her very existence. No, he wouldn't take her on vacation, and he wouldn't visit her more often. To him, it was better to live his own somewhat lonely life without her and her grandmother. It was hurtful. After all, Amalia loved her only parent very much. Realizing that you're not needed by your father is scary and unpleasant. The girl even cried a little into her pillow that night, but by morning she acted like nothing had happened. Then, her father left, hugging his daughter as usual before saying goodbye. "I'm going on a long voyage," he warned. "We won't see each other for a while. I won't be able to come on your first day of school. Please forgive me." "It's okay," the girl waved her hand nonchalantly. She was used to her father being absent during the most important moments of her life. No big deal. Her grandmother was always there. It was the summer before Amalia's first grade, and she remembered it well because her birthday was in August and an important event happened that day. As always, her grandmother set up 2 tables in the garden, one for the children and another for their parents, grandparents, and relatives. Grandmother always made her granddaughters' birthdays like that, crowded, cheerful, and colorful. The woman herself enjoyed the company of good people immensely. Amalia and her grandmother had been eagerly anticipating this celebration all year. Senor Saiz arrived a little later than the other guests and gave Amalia a huge teddy bear, which he had chosen with the help of his granddaughters, Christina and Marina. Amalia was delighted when she saw the plush animal. She had never had such huge toys before. "Happy birthday!" Christina and Marina rushed to hug the birthday girl. "Thank you." Amalia clapped her hands. "But what's that in Senor Saiz's hands?" "Oh, he found a guitar in the attic recently. He was going through it, thinking of throwing away unnecessary junk, and stumbled upon this instrument." "Saiz, I almost forgot that you're a musician," the grandmother exclaimed with joy. "When was the last time you played?" "Probably since your wife passed away. You haven't touched the guitar." "Yes, it's been about 15 years, the neighbor nodded, a hint of sadness flickering in his eyes. "I forgot about the guitar, and then suddenly I found it, and it all came back to me." "Play something for us," someone from the adult guests requested. "Play, play." The kids chimed in. Christina and Marina were beaming with pride next to their grandpa. No wonder. Senor Saiz had suddenly become the star of the party. Look at everyone looking at him, begging him to play. "Well, what should I play for you? How about a folk song?" the man asked. Everyone enthusiastically agreed. Then Senor Saiz adjusted the guitar comfortably, strummed the strings with his fingers, and something magical began. Melodious sounds filled the garden. Amalia watched her neighbor, her mouth open in amazement. How did he do that? How did this beautiful melody come to life? The guests fell silent, watching Senor Saiz. "Come on, why are you all quiet? Sing along, let's go. Who's first? Who's the bravest?" Rocio's mother, the neighbor boy and one of Amalia's friends, started a humorous folk song with her deep voice. She sang something about a sweet calf. The adults laughed. Amalia didn't pay much attention to the lyrics of the folk songs. She was listening to the melody. The guests got into the groove. They kept requesting new songs from Senor Saiz, and surprisingly, he knew them all. Well, if he didn't know, he quickly found the right melodies. The adults sang in a not-so-harmonious choir. It was magical, fun, and beautiful. The kids left the table and started a game of hide and seek. They invited Amalia to join them, but she couldn't tear herself away. She sat next to Senor Saiz, listening intently, and then, almost imperceptibly, began to sing along with the adults. She quickly learned the lyrics of the song about a wounded soldier. The guests were already singing it for the third time when Rocio's mother first noticed. "Listen," she suddenly said. "Can you hear how she sings?" The guests fell silent, and so did Amalia. She felt embarrassed to sing alone. Rocio's mother understood this and joined in, singing the song together with her. It made it easier for Amalia. When the chords finally faded, applause erupted. "Well done." The adults praised Amalia. "You sing beautifully." Not just beautifully, Rocio's mother shook her head. "The girl has talent. I'm saying this as an employee of our cultural center. Fuentes, why have you been hiding such a treasure from us all these years? Well, I didn't even know myself, the proud grandmother smiled. Since then, Senor Saiz became an even more frequent guest in the grandmother and granddaughter's home. And Amalia now constantly ran to him. The man taught the girl many cheerful children's songs. Now she sang them everywhere, at home, in the garden, even on the way to the store. Why hadn't Amalia realized how wonderful singing was before? She didn't attend kindergarten because it was too far away. Besides, her grandmother had stopped working. So, Amalia grew up with her. If only there had been a music teacher at home, they might have noticed Amalia's talent earlier. But there was hardly any music at home. Grandmother usually listened to audiobooks rather than songs. That's how it happened that Amalia didn't discover her love for singing and music until she was 7. When school starts, we'll send you to the cultural center with Rocio's mother. She says they have a great choir there. They even get invited to perform in other cities. You'll sing there. We can't bury such a talent in the ground. Amalia listened to her grandmother and eagerly awaited September. She wanted to be on stage, to be with people who shared her passion. The future seemed bright and enchanting. And then, the girl even persuaded Senor Saiz to teach her how to play the guitar. At first, he refused. It's too early for you. Your fingers are small, and your hands are weak. You won't be able to handle such a big instrument. But the neighbor was mistaken. Amalia immediately managed to grasp the necessary chords on her first try. Marina and Christina even clapped their hands in joy for their friend. See, Grandpa? She's doing it. Will you teach her? Of course, I will, Senor Saiz scratched his head in puzzlement. Where can I hide from you now? The neighbor kept his promise. He now taught little Amalia chords and everything he knew every day. The student made great progress. Not only did the girl pick up everything quickly, but she also learned how to create her own melodies. I don't really know much about this, Senor Saiz shared his observations with Amalia's grandmother. But it seems she has an exceptional ear. She should go to a music school. That would be great, the grandmother sighed. But we don't have one in our village. There's only a choir here, and you can't travel to the city every day. At least they agreed to let her join the choir. Anna promised. Although our granddaughter is still young, the other kids there are a bit older. Then the long-awaited first day of school arrived. Amalia still remembered how her grandmother proudly led her by the hand through the village streets to the school assembly. The girl was a little nervous, but it was a joyful excitement. She and her grandmother had carefully prepared for the festive day. The day before, they went to the city where they spent a long time choosing the most beautiful things: shiny shoes, a stylish white blouse, and a dark skirt. In the morning, her grandmother braided tight braids for Amalia, adorned with big white bows. Passers-by smiled at the grandmother and the smartly dressed granddaughter, congratulating them both on the beginning of the school journey and wishing the girl straight A's. Amalia thanked the people. She knew there would be a celebration in the evening. Her grandmother had already invited the neighborhood children over, and she had started preparing her special pies in the evening. Amalia was also looking forward to the start of her classes at the cultural center. She wanted to sing on stage so much. Rocio's mother assured her that Amalia would be well liked by the teacher. And it turned out to be true. Senor Gallardo highly appreciated the new student's abilities. True, he didn't go easy on her, despite her age. If the girl missed the notes or messed up the lyrics, he would scold her sternly. But these were minor things. The main thing was that Amalia felt at home. Her grandmother worried that the shy granddaughter would get nervous in front of the audience. But no, the little singer felt at ease on stage. At first, they made her sing backup, but then she began performing solo. Senor Gallardo couldn't have been happier with his student. Such a talent is rare, he told Amalia's grandmother when she came to pick up her granddaughter. A genuine, uncut diamond. She should be in good hands. But what do we have here? just an ordinary village cultural center. Amalia didn't give up her guitar lessons either. It had become a daily necessity for her. As a student, the girl had long surpassed her neighbor teacher. But she still visited Senor Saiz every day. First of all, he had a guitar. Secondly, the neighbor could always give valuable and important advice about playing. And thirdly, none of Amalia's acquaintances knew as much about music as Senor Saiz did. He praised her genuinely, noticed nuances, and sincerely admired the little neighbor's progress. Later, living with her father, Amalia learned the expression kindred spirit. Perhaps she and Senor Saiz were exactly those kindred spirits. The neighbor had replaced Amalia's grandfather, whom she had never known, and maybe even her father in some moments. Time passed, and Amalia grew up. She excelled in school, performed with the choir, and continued to learn to play the guitar. On her birthday, her father gave her a guitar of her own, a gift idea that had been suggested by her grandmother. Amalia had everything she needed for happiness: a caring grandmother by her side, understanding and kind neighbors, loyal friends. She felt loved and cherished. In her village, she was at home and never even thought about moving to the city to live with her father. What was there to do in the city? Gray concrete boxes instead of houses, crowds of people rushing somewhere without even looking at each other. And her father, a relative but still a stranger. People around often talked about how the city offered more opportunities and how growing up there would be much more interesting for the girl. But Amalia felt perfectly happy and content with her life. Her childhood was warm, sunny, and cozy until that fateful February day when, for some reason, Senor Saiz came to her school. Amalia had been going to school for a while and coming home by herself. Initially, her grandmother accompanied her, but from the second grade onward, Amalia became quite independent in this regard. The journey was not short, but in the company of her friends and neighbors, time passed quickly. The girls walked and chatted about everything under the sun, laughing, discussing the details of their school day, making plans. And then suddenly, a knock on the door during a literature class, a quiet conversation between the teacher and someone who didn't step inside. And then the worried eyes of Sonora Montero, and her quiet request. "Amalia, get ready, your neighbor has come for you." Amalia felt the gaze of everyone in the classroom turn toward her. It was so unusual. Upon seeing Senor Saiz, Amalia immediately understood that something terrible had happened. His gaze was dull, his face pale, and his hands, which were usually calm, were trembling slightly. "Grandma?" Amalia guessed right away. A feeling of cold dread squeezed her heart. In that moment, the girl realized that her grandmother was her entire world. The man nodded silently. "What happened to her?" "She's not feeling well. They took her to the hospital." Senor Saiz only told the girl at home that her grandmother was no longer alive. The woman had suddenly felt unwell, her heart had seized. She had sat down on a bench outside their house, hoping to wait it out. That's how the neighbor found her, coming over to borrow a few eggs. An ambulance was called immediately, but the arriving doctors could only confirm her death. That night, Amalia was taken in by her neighbor, Sonora Delgado, who had been a close friend of her grandmother. They were like family. In the company of the compassionate woman and her grandchildren, Amalia felt less lonely than if she had stayed alone at home. However, the girl still found herself in an inexplicable state. Everything that was happening seemed unreal to her. It couldn't possibly be true. How could it? Her grandmother was gone. And what? She would never be there again. Never, ever? Her father was on a long-haul trip. They had informed him, of course, but it would take him some time to reach the mainland. He didn't even make it back in time for the funeral organized by the neighbors. During those difficult days, for some reason, Amalia didn't think about her future. She cried a lot, often talked to neighbors about her grandmother. They knew and loved her, spoke kind words about her. This made it a little easier for the girl. And then her father arrived, awkwardly hugged his daughter, and uttered words that made Amalia cringe with pain once again. "So, my dear, shall we live together in the city now?" "In the city? Why in the city?" Amalia didn't want to leave her village at all. Her grandmother was no longer there, of course, and would never be, but here was her school, here were her friends, here were the neighbors. Here was the choir, after all. Here was Señor Saiz, who would always support and comfort her. Here was Senora Delgado, Rocio, and Rocio's mother. But what about there? A cold, unfamiliar father who knew nothing about his daughter. He was practically a stranger to Amalia. "I won't go with you," Amalia firmly declared, stepping away from her parent. "I won't go to the city." The man looked at his daughter, his eyes filled with confusion. He didn't know what to say in response. The neighbors came to the rescue. They gently and carefully conveyed to Amalia the thought that there was no other option. The neighbors hugged the girl, said that they would miss her very much too. Tears welled up in the eyes of these people, women and men, grandmothers and grandfathers. They gave her their phone numbers and assured her that they would always be happy to hear from her. Amalia cried too. It was hard for her to part with the village, but the sensitive adults managed to persuade her that it had to be done. Otherwise, there was no choice. "Come visit us," Señor Saiz said, during the holidays. "You'll live with Marina and Cristina. What difference does it make to me, 2 girls or 3? And it'll be more fun for you all." Amalia knew that this wasn't just a polite invitation. Señor Saiz genuinely looked forward to her during the holidays, and that made her feel a little warmer and brighter inside. So, Amalia moved to the city. It wasn't her first time in her father's apartment. She and her grandmother used to visit him occasionally. Amalia even had her own room there. A bed, a large wardrobe, a writing desk, everything a child needed. However, she never liked this place. Much more, she loved her bedroom at her grandmother's house. There were many cozy and important things there: plush toys, interesting books, and an aquarium with colorful fish. But there was no escaping it. She had to settle into this new place. The first thing Amalia did was place that very plush teddy bear on the bed. Señor Saiz had given it to her in the summer before first grade. It immediately felt cozier. The toy reminded the girl of those happy carefree times when her grandmother was still there. Amalia's life was completely turned upside down. She had to get used to many things: a new room, a new school, new faces around her, unfamiliar surroundings, different rules, and her father, who was constantly lost in his thoughts. He had switched to a different job that didn't involve long trips anymore. Now, he needed to be with his daughter all the time, and he really was physically present, but his thoughts were clearly elsewhere. Amalia could see that her father missed the sea, his colleagues, his old job. He often complained to acquaintances about how much less money he was making now. "I can't get used to living like this, counting pennies until payday," the man would tell someone from his former colleagues over the phone. But here, in the big city, there's not much here. It's not like the sea, you can't earn enough. Leonardo tried very hard to be a good father. In the mornings, he would prepare breakfast for his daughter, and in the evenings, he would always ask Amalia about how her day went. However, he only half listened to her. Amalia could see that he was not really interested in her opinion about her teacher or what her classmates had said to her. Leonardo bought everything Amalia needed: clothes, groceries, school supplies, toys. He even enrolled her in a music school. "You used to play the guitar often back in the village. Why don't you play it anymore?" Amalia sighed. Yes, it was true. Since her grandmother had passed away, she hadn't played anything just because she didn't feel like it. So much had happened. There was a constant chaos in her heart and mind. By the end of the day, the girl was so tired from her own thoughts, impressions, and emotions that she fell asleep like a log. Was it even the guitar's fault? But her father's words made Amalia remember her beloved instrument. She picked up the guitar, ran her fingers over the strings, and immediately felt better. It was as if warmth from the past had washed over her. And why hadn't she realized earlier that music would soothe her like this? "Would you like to go to a music school?" her father suggested. Amalia thought for a moment and agreed. From a young age, she had heard from people around her that she should go there, that in their small village, her talent would not fully flourish, that she needed competent teachers from the city. And now, here was that very opportunity that everyone had talked about. It took a lot of effort for her father to get her enrolled. Firstly, the school year was already coming to an end. Secondly, the age of the student did not suit the school's standards. Amalia had just turned 10, and the music school usually accepted 6 to 7-year-olds. But her father knew how to insist on what he believed in. And just a couple of days after their conversation, Amalia began attending the new institution. The school was big and bright. It was nothing like their rural house of culture, where the interiors hadn't changed much from old standards. Everything here was different. At first, Amalia was even a bit afraid of the new teachers. They seemed too strict and distant. But when classes began, she realized that she had ended up exactly where she needed to be. There were so many new things to learn, so many intricacies. Amalia absorbed musical knowledge like a sponge, and, of course, she made great progress. Very soon, her teachers started praising the diligent, talented student. It was very rewarding. The girl gradually settled into the city. She made new friends, although she didn't form the same warm and almost familial relationships as with the kids in the village. But it wasn't common to be friends like that here. Still, it was great. Amalia went to the movies and the ice rink with her classmates, to pizza places, and to entertainment centers. Sometimes they would just stroll through the park, and other times, they would gather at someone's house. The birthdays of local children were nothing like those in the village. They weren't cozy gatherings of kids and adults. Instead, they involved trips to the bowling alley, the trampoline center, and animated entertainers dressed as cartoon characters. It was interesting, and in some ways even fun. But every time, Amalia would remember her own heartfelt, full of sincere hugs, birthdays. Her loving grandmother used to organize them for her. How Amalia missed and longed for her. This wasn't the first significant loss in her life. But her mother, she didn't know her, wasn't accustomed to her, so she didn't feel too much about her absence. Her grandmother, on the other hand, was an entirely different matter. Her relationship with her father was polite, but somehow strained and awkward. He tried to be an involved parent, but he never succeeded. He wasn't interested in his daughter's thoughts and feelings. He didn't understand her at all. Amalia didn't feel even a hint of the love and warmth that her grandmother had given her. It was very difficult. The girl was literally freezing inside. Luckily, music was there in her life. Amalia would take her guitar, and it would help her melt into the melodious sounds. She played the pieces assigned by her teachers, but she also picked out songs she liked or composed her own. Through music, she released her emotions, her longing for her grandmother and her old life, her anxieties, her desire to be closer to her only family member now, her father. Music relaxed her, calmed her, and helped her feel more confident. Time passed. The life of their small family gradually improved. Leonardo was surprised to discover that his daughter was an excellent cook. It was unexpected. Children her age, among his acquaintances, didn't know how to handle a knife and were still considered almost toddlers. Amalia, on the other hand, skillfully used all the kitchen tools and, at her young age, baked incredible pies and cooked aromatic soup. When Amalia prepared a delicious dinner for them from the leftover groceries she found in the refrigerator one day, her father was amazed. Returning from work, he caught a whiff of something that made his mouth water, but it never occurred to him that these scents were coming from their own apartment. "Is this all you?" Leonardo exclaimed in surprise as he entered the apartment. "Or did someone visit us?" "It's me," Amalia smiled. She liked seeing the expression of astonishment on her father's face. "Grandma taught me." Indeed, her grandmother had been teaching her the art of cooking from a very young age. Even as a little girl, Amalia helped her knead dough, and as she grew older, she learned to handle a knife like a seasoned cook. She even enjoyed cooking. It was almost like music, a true art form. Now, Amalia often cooked for their small family and did it with great pleasure. She enjoyed seeing how eagerly her father devoured her culinary creations. Gradually, their relationship improved. Yes, the adaptation had been difficult and very long, and both of them had to make an effort. But in the end, Amalia got what she wanted, the warmth and care of her beloved family member, her father. This didn't happen all at once, it wasn't sudden. Leonardo's paternal heart gradually thawed. The icy shell that had encased it began to crack and then slowly crumble. One day, Leonardo realized that he enjoyed talking to his daughter. She had become mature and thoughtful, and her life was rich, filled with events and experiences. Now, her father looked at her in an entirely different way. Amalia could feel this change and was delighted by it. Her father no longer withdrew into himself after work. No, Leonardo now shared his future plans and work updates with his daughter. They even went on vacation together several times, just as her grandmother had wished. Leonardo showed Amalia big cities, and the girl marveled and admired the sights, looking around in amazement. Leonardo genuinely enjoyed her reactions. These were such wonderful trips. Amalia discovered that her father was very intelligent and knowledgeable. He had expertise in various areas: architecture, history, archaeology, culture, and he enthusiastically shared this knowledge with his daughter. In the first summer after her grandmother's passing, Amalia and her father came to the village. Leonardo prepared the house for their extended stay, closing the windows with shutters, covering the furniture with plastic, and clearing out unnecessary clutter from the attic and basement. He also found some real treasures, albums filled with photographs that her grandmother had carefully preserved. This family archive was taken by her father to their city apartment. Preparing the house took just a couple of days. During that time, Amalia felt like she had traveled back in time. Familiar and beloved places, friendly neighbors, old friends who had missed her. When her father told her it was time to leave, tears welled up in Amalia's eyes. Leave? But we've hardly been here at all. Well, it's time for me to go back to work, and I've finished everything I needed to do here. Why should we stay? At that time, her father hadn't really gotten to know his daughter well. He couldn't understand her feelings. But Senor Saiz, of course, immediately understood everything. Let her stay with me for a couple of weeks, the elderly man turned to Leonardo. My granddaughters are here. They've been friends since birth and miss each other. They'll play, run to the river and the forest, breathe fresh air. It's happiness. It's better than the girl spending the whole day cooped up in that stuffy concrete box while you're at work. It's kind of strange, Leonardo hesitated. You, Uncle Chano, are not really related to her. What do you mean not related? The old man exclaimed. She's like a third granddaughter to me. I've been taking care of her since then. These words from the elderly neighbor warmed Amalia's heart. She looked at her father imploringly. Spending a few weeks in beloved village with her best friends sounded like pure happiness. Her father agreed, and Amalia jumped for joy, with Christina and Marina leaping alongside her. It was a wonderful time, just like always playing with friends until late at night, familiar places, neighbors who had known her since birth. But her grandmother was no longer there, and her house looked out onto the road with boarded-up shutters. Sadness occasionally gripped Amalia's heart. Those around her could keenly sense these mood swings and tried to support her. Being with them made it easier for her. But then her father came to take her back to the city, and it all ended. Amalia cried as she left for the city. Her friends hugged her, and Senor Saiz patted her head. Well, don't cry, my dear, don't get all soggy. You're not leaving forever, after all. When you have your autumn break, let your father bring you here to relax. We're all here waiting for you. Amalia understood that the elderly neighbor wasn't just saying that out of politeness and that she was genuinely always welcome in this village. The realization of this simple truth made her feel lighter and warmer inside. But Amalia never came back for a visit to the village again. Shortly after her departure, Senor Saiz had a stroke and was hospitalized. He recovered, but he couldn't live alone in the village anymore. Senor Saiz was taken in by his daughter, Marina, and Christina's mother. The family lived in another city, so Amalia never saw her childhood friends or the kind neighbor again. Another twist of fate, another blow. Regardless, Amalia had become accustomed to her new reality. Her relationship with her father had become warmer and more heartfelt, and their daily life had settled into a routine. Life wasn't so bad after all. At least, Amalia always had her father by her side, ready to support and listen to her. And she appreciated that. But her father. He talked more and more about wanting to return to the sea. You know, it's my element, the waves, the wind, the sea air, and the open space. It's breathtaking. Amalia understood. She understood what it was like when your heart starts to race with joy upon seeing your beloved landscapes. And we don't have enough money, Leonardo lamented. Those who go on voyages are paid several times more, and here, on land, the salaries are completely different. Amalia didn't think they were in need. They had everything they needed and more. They dressed nicely, ate well, and traveled. But her father still dreamt of more and often reminisced about his previous earnings. Well, I'm already grown up, Amalia reasonably pointed out one day. I'm 13. I've been going to school on my own for a long time, and I've known how to cook since I was a child. Why don't you go back to the sea? I can handle things on my own. No, you're still a child. I can't leave you alone for so long. Who knows what might happen? What could possibly happen? Amalia genuinely wondered. She felt independent enough to live on her own for a month or two. Yes, it would be boring without her dad, of course, but she could manage. By law, I can't leave you alone. You're only 13. If the neighbors find out, they'll call Child Protective Services. Yes, the neighbors here are strange. Not like in village, Amalia agreed. How would you feel about having a nanny? Her father asked. A nanny? Amalia scoffed. Am I some kind of toddler? Well, if I go on a voyage, I need someone to look after you. It won't be a nanny for toddlers, it'll be more like a housekeeper, your assistant in running the household. I don't need any assistant, Amalia grumbled. But she already understood that her father wouldn't leave her alone. It wasn't proper. All right then, go ahead and hire your housekeeper, Amalia waved her hand dismissively. Her father, after deciding to return to the sea, became immediately uplifted. He smiled and joked a lot. Leonardo looked absolutely content. Amalia was happy for her father, but also a bit worried. What if she didn't get along with this woman who was supposed to take care of her and the house? What if she turned out to be some unpleasant lady? The search for a housekeeper wasn't going very well. Leonardo contacted many agencies and called numbers from advertisements, but he only came across nannies for young children. They were either retirees or students willing to spend a few hours a day with a small child for a fee. But no one was willing to live with a teenager and take care of the apartment. Nonetheless, Leonardo didn't lose hope. Whoever seeks will always find, he optimistically told his daughter after another failed attempt. One day, Leonardo returned from a friend's birthday party in a cheerful mood. It was late evening. Amalia was working on a challenging math homework when her elated father approached her and announced that everything was settled. What settled? Amalia didn't understand. I found you a nanny, or rather, a housekeeper. It's such a perfect arrangement. Amalia felt a little tense. After all, this was about her future. Can you explain more? She asked. And her father proceeded to tell her the story of this fateful encounter. Leonardo had attended his friend Enrique's birthday party. They had graduated from university together and had even worked on the same ship for a time. Their paths had diverged over the years, but warm friendships had persisted. Enrique was celebrating a milestone birthday, and he decided to throw a grand celebration at a restaurant. Many of the guests were people Leonardo had never met before, including Iris, Enrique's wife's friend. She was a tall, slender woman who looked stunning. She was stylishly dressed and exuded warmth and friendliness. At some point, Iris and Leonardo struck up a conversation. Both had had a bit to drink and were feeling relaxed. The evening had progressed to a phase of revelations, with fascinating and candid life stories being shared. It turned out that Iris had recently divorced her husband. Well, according to her, her husband had simply thrown her and her daughter out onto the street over a silly argument. How could he treat his own child like that? Leonardo exclaimed. I have a daughter myself. Margarita is not his daughter, Iris sighed. She's my child from my first marriage. My husband, now ex, could never accept another man's child. He never loved her. Iris found herself in a desperate situation. She didn't have enough money for rent, and she couldn't find a good job because she lacked education and experience. Iris had dedicated herself entirely to her husband and daughter. She managed the household, cooked delicious meals for her husband, and took care of the domestic chores. Her husband, a successful businessman, provided for the family financially. And now I'm alone, in such dire straits, Iris lamented. I take on any odd jobs I can find just to feed myself and Margarita. My parents have been gone for a long time, and there's no one else to turn to for help. My friend invited me to this party, saying I needed a break from constantly worrying about my problems. Yes, and I used to think my situation was hopeless, Leonardo replied. It must be even harder for you. I hope everything works out for you in the end. I will try to help you find work. It seems like our maritime company is looking for a secretary. What happened to you? Iris asked, not really paying attention to the potential job offer, but rather focused on the phrase hopeless situation. And Leonardo told this sensitive, beautiful woman everything about the death of his beloved wife during childbirth, about his daughter, about his mother who raised the girl until she was 10, about the difficulties of adapting to his own child when Amalia suddenly lost the care of her loving grandmother, and, of course, about his dream of the sea. I'm looking for someone like a nanny for my daughter, Leonardo said. But nobody seems willing to take the job. People offer hourly babysitting services for toddlers, but nobody wants to live with a teenager and take care of the house. Iris's eyes lit up after hearing this confession from the man. Really? Can't you see that our meeting today was not a coincidence? She exclaimed. It's like a miracle. Our path crossing was not accidental. It would become clear much later that it was no mere coincidence that brought Leonardo and Iris together. Enrique's wife knew about Leonardo's situation, and she was eager to help her friend who had found herself in dire straits. The women deliberately arranged the meeting between Iris and Leonardo at the party, thinking it was a wonderful opportunity for both the woman and the single man. How old is your child? Iris asked. She's 13, Leonardo replied. And my daughter Margarita is 15. I know how to raise teenage girls. I can relate to them and enjoy spending time with them. We will definitely get along. Leonardo paused to consider. He needed a housekeeper, that much was true. But he had expected to hire a professional from a specialized agency. Now, Iris and her daughter presented a different proposition. However, time was running out. He had to leave soon, and the problem remained unsolved. Your daughter is entering adolescence soon. It's a very challenging period. I know this well. My Margarita and I have already been through it. At that age, children need special attention, or trouble isn't far away. Iris spoke persuasively and appeared quite confident. Leonardo pondered for a moment. Indeed, this woman had significant experience in dealing with children. After all, her daughter was slightly older than Amalia. The two girls would find each other interesting, they would definitely get along. Besides, Iris was a genuine beauty. Leonardo enjoyed her company. She had a way of making people feel at ease. Thinking it over, the man agreed. I think this is an excellent idea, he smiled at Iris, who he was growing more and more fond of. A strong woman who had endured many blows of fate without breaking. She radiated kindness. Pleasant, intelligent, and sensitive. Yes, this was the kind of person Leonardo would like to have around Amalia. Iris and her daughter Margarita moved into Leonardo and Amalia's apartment. Leonardo accommodated them in the living room. There was enough space. Initially, both Iris and Margarita appeared to Amalia as charming and kind individuals. "Wow, your hair looks amazing," Margarita exclaimed upon seeing Amalia. "Can I try styling it for you?" Amalia shrugged. She had never been particularly concerned about hairstyles. A neat ponytail was all she did before school. However, Margarita crafted a stylish hairstyle with braids on Amalia's head that suited her incredibly well. Amalia admired her reflection in the mirror. "You look beautiful," Margarita smiled. You do too," Amalia stammered. And it was the plain truth. Both Margarita and her mother were genuine beauties. Tall, slender, and with big, expressive eyes, they invariably turned heads. Moreover, both Margarita and Iris knew how to accentuate their physical attributes. They chose the right outfits, skillfully applied makeup, and created beautiful and very stylish hairstyles. Amalia initially perceived all of this as a kind of magic. Their home with her father had never had any cosmetics or closets filled with clothes. She watched Iris's every move with fascination as she applied makeup in front of the mirror. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Iris smiled, noticing the girl's curious gaze. "Come, sit next to me. I'll show you how it's done." In half an hour, Iris turned Amalia into someone entirely different. In the mirror, the girl saw not herself but a beautiful young woman with mermaid-like eyes, delicate rosy cheeks, and plump doll-like lips. "You look magnificent," Iris exclaimed. "Always carry yourself like this." But Amalia couldn't always carry herself that way. Sure, it looked beautiful, but she didn't like the feeling of makeup on her face. Besides, it was time-consuming. Applying makeup and then removing it afterward could take up to an hour. Iris and Margarita gave Amalia something she had been missing: female attention. They went shopping together, discussing movies, celebrities, and gossiping. Margarita always braided Amalia's hair before school, creating wonderful, stylish, and comfortable hairstyles. Moreover, Iris and Margarita helped Amalia with her wardrobe. "Your clothes are so baggy and plain," Iris complained, inspecting the girl's wardrobe. "They don't allow anything else at school," Amalia shrugged. It was something she had never really thought about before. "Nonsense. You can always find something that fits both the rules and looks beautiful." "Margarita, it seems it's time for us to go shopping. Will you join us? Your taste is simply wonderful, and we'll need your advice." "Of course, I'm coming with you. I love shopping." Iris and Margarita indeed picked out clothes for Amalia in which she looked like a princess: form-fitting lace blouses, slightly shortened skirts, and high-heeled shoes. "There you go, that's more like it," Iris exclaimed, admiring her ward. "You have a wonderful figure. You're slim, long-legged. Why hide it under shapeless baggy clothes? You might as well put a potato sack on yourself." Amalia had never received so many compliments at school before. For the first time in her life, she felt like a real beauty, not just a clever girl. It was wonderful. Margarita became a true older friend for Amalia, almost like a sister she had always dreamed of. She was older, and Margarita shared her stories about relationships with boys and friends. It was so captivating that Amalia even forgot to breathe sometimes. It was like a real-life TV show. Margarita turned out to be an excellent storyteller. Her speech flowed smoothly and calmly, and vivid pictures from the life of this beautiful girl emerged in Amalia's mind. Amalia admired Margarita. "Are you whispering again?" Iris peeked into the room. "Let's go watch movies already. They've delivered pizza. These were wonderful days." Amalia felt like a part of an elegant female world. Her father. She adored him, but he couldn't provide her with all this girly stuff. It turned out that Amalia needed this kind of interaction. She had never even suspected it before. When Iris found out that Amalia could cook well, she was ecstatic. "Wow!" exclaimed the woman when she saw the girl taking a tray of pastries out of the oven. "Did you make these yourself?" "Yes," Amalia answered with pride. "My grandma taught me a long time ago. I've been able to do this for a while." Amalia was tired of ordering restaurant food, so she decided to treat Iris and Margarita to some homemade pastries. "This is divine," praised Margarita, taking a big bite of the pie. "I've never tasted anything like this, but it's not good for my figure, of course." "At your age, it's not a problem," Iris smiled. "But you, Amalia, are simply amazing. You won't believe it, but I still can't bake. And you're so young and already so skilled." Amalia blossomed from these compliments. Now, to please Iris and Margarita, she tried to cook something for them every day. It was genuinely better than Iris's cooking. Iris's soups often turned out too watery and oversalted, and her casseroles were often burnt on top and undercooked inside. That's why Iris preferred ordering food. For Amalia, it was easy to prepare dinner or lunch for the three of them. She did it with joy. Margarita and Iris had taken care of her and taught her so much. And then father returned. Iris and Rita moved back to their rented apartment. And Amalia. This fact really upset her. Amalia missed girls' heart-to-heart talks, trips to cafes and stores. She longed for Iris and Rita, who had shown her a completely different side of life, the one Amalia had never suspected. Father, of course, asked his daughter how she was doing in his absence. Amalia described Iris and Rita in the brightest colors. "They are so cool. You can't imagine," she shared her impressions with her parent. "It's so interesting and nice with them." Father smiled. The girl could see that he was pleased with her stories. A month passed, and Leonardo was sent on a flight again. This time, for an even longer period than the first time. And again, Iris came to take care of Amalia and her daughter. Time flew by unnoticed, and when father returned, Iris and Rita hadn't gone anywhere. They stayed in the apartment, which made Amalia incredibly happy. Of course, the girl noticed that her father looked at Iris in a special way. And the woman herself, although she tried to hide it, clearly sympathized with her employer. But Amalia thought it was all in her imagination, that she was just projecting her wishes onto reality. It turned out that wasn't the case. It had been heading that way for a while. Rita looked at Amalia as if she were a little child when she shared her impressions of what was happening. "I never doubted that this would happen. I just got the timing a little wrong." "Well, yes, Rita, she's so attentive and experienced. She has a keen eye." Father went on another flight, after which he and Iris got married. They didn't have a lavish wedding. They just sat together in a restaurant. Amalia was on cloud 9 at the time. This beautiful, kind woman had entered their family. She would now live with them, giving Amalia the much-needed female attention. It was wonderful. Amalia had long dreamed of something like this, but it turned out even better than she could have imagined. She not only gained Iris, but also Rita, practically an older sister, a friend who knows so many interesting things. Everything changed as soon as father left on his flight. The stamp in Iris's passport drastically changed her attitude toward her stepdaughter. Amalia expected her stepmother and stepsister to behave the same way as before, taking care of her, having heart-to-heart talks, going for walks together. But all of that suddenly stopped. Iris hung out with her friends and went to beauty salons. Rita also lived her own life, friends, admirers, nightclubs. And Amalia, she was completely alone. Alone again. People stopped paying attention to her abruptly. The only thing the girl received praise for was cooking and cleaning. Amalia single-handedly cleaned the entire apartment and cooked amazing lunches and dinners just to earn Iris's approval. She didn't understand what was happening. Her stepmother praised her quietly and ordered new dishes for the next day. Sometimes Iris would ask Amalia to mop the floors. That was the extent of their interaction. Amalia felt lost and deceived. "Rita, tell me how you used to hang out in the club," the girl once asked Rita. Rita glanced absent-mindedly at Amalia and didn't reply. When the girl repeated her question, Rita sighed heavily and muttered, "Why are you so annoying? You're like some kind of clingy pest. It's impossible to be around you." This was a blow to Amalia. She thought that she and Rita were friends. The girl used to willingly share details of her life with her. They spent a lot of time together, going out. Rita gave Amalia invaluable advice on makeup and matching clothing. And now this. It got worse. Iris got the hang of it. Now all household chores were Amalia's responsibility. Stepmother hardly cooked in her husband's absence. It became the stepdaughter's duty. Cleaning was no different. If, in the past, the girl at least received praise for helping with household chores, now she only received reprimands if she couldn't get something done. And it was difficult. After all, Amalia still had school and music school to attend. Of course, her grades suffered. It's impossible to do all the household chores and study well at the same time. Amalia tried to explain to Iris that she couldn't cope. "I'm tired, I can't keep up with my homework. I've missed music school several times already. Let Rita cook and clean sometimes." "This, my dear, is called laziness." Iris looked at her stepdaughter with an indifferent gaze. "Nothing supernatural is expected of you. Didn't you know that people who live together share household responsibilities equally?" Equally. That sounded nothing like the truth. Rita lived for her own pleasure, meeting friends, going on dates, frequent shopping trips, and beauty salons. Sometimes the underage Rita didn't even come home to sleep. Iris would call her, and sometimes even drive somewhere at night to pick up her wayward daughter. Only her father, he knew nothing about this side of Rita's life. In his presence, the girl behaved impeccably. Rita did absolutely nothing around the house. Even making the bed was left to Amalia. "Rita is getting ready for her graduation exams," Iris explained in response to Amalia's valid complaints. At first, the girl tried to defend herself. "You won't be graduating for another 2 years, but she's about to." But Amalia had never seen Rita with a textbook in her hands. The girl attended school reluctantly. She had serious academic problems. All she cared about were dates and parties, and her appearance was her only concern. Rita was a regular at cosmetologists and beauty salons. Of course, it paid off. The girl looked simply stunning, well-groomed, striking, and stylish. The lion's share of the money that father left for household expenses was spent on herself and her daughter by Iris. Amalia received what was left over. Iris took care of the kitchen and house only when her husband was home, creating the image of the perfect housewife. The woman didn't work. She explained to her husband that right now the girls needed special attention. It's a difficult age and all that, keeping an eye on teenagers during this period. Leonardo agreed with Iris's arguments. She had a talent for persuading others that her decisions were rational and beneficial to everyone. It was her gift. Leonardo even sincerely believed that he himself had suggested to his wife that she take care of the house and children, and he appreciated Iris's sacrifice, as he thought it was, of her career for the sake of the family's happiness and well-being. It was almost like a heroic act. Iris had a significant influence over her father. He looked at her with adoring eyes, believed every word his wife said, and considered her flawless and infallible. Amalia used to like this in the past. She was happy for her father. After so many years alone, he had finally found love. But now it hurt Amalia, and even frightened her. Gradually, Iris transformed from a kind and caring woman into a monster. Stepmother began to impose increasingly higher demands on Amalia. Every day, she criticized the girl, Her cooking was not good enough, she cleaned too slowly, and she paid too much attention to nonsense. "What are you plucking away at with that rubbish of yours?" Iris pointed disdainfully, her fingers adorned with impeccable manicure, at Amalia's guitar. "My head hurts from your monotonous songs already." Amalia remained silent. She knew that as soon as she opened her mouth and tried to defend herself, a torrent of insults would be unleashed upon her. It was a stage she had already been through. It was better to stay quiet. That way, her stepmother would calm down faster. Yes, Iris didn't like Amalia's interest in music. She had called the girl untalented more than once, constantly asked her to play more quietly, as if that were even possible. She even forced her stepdaughter to skip lessons at the music school. But music was Amalia's true salvation. Playing the guitar calmed her, relaxed her, and brought her joy. And there was so little joy in Amalia's life already. Of course, Iris behaved completely differently in her father's presence. Amalia couldn't get used to these transformations. The caring, concerned mother, the wonderful homemaker, the loving wife, Iris was all of that when Leonardo was around. Her father often repeated how lucky he was to have found such a woman. Iris slowly but skillfully turned the man against his daughter. She did it carefully, delicately, and with virtuosity. She disguised herself. She presented herself to Leonardo as a concerned parent. Amalia is going through adolescence, puberty. She has become like. She's rude, lazy, and hates everyone around. Her studies are suffering, she's not interested in them. She only cares about going out. This is what Iris would tell Leonardo, not particularly caring whether Amalia overheard their conversation. It didn't matter to her. The man wouldn't believe his daughter's words if she tried to defend herself. Iris's influence was too strong. The woman manipulated those around her skillfully. "What should we do?" Leonardo looked at his wife with concern. He was waiting for advice, help, and support. Of course, he loved his daughter and didn't want her to slide into despair. Yes, Iris even used such vivid expressions for the sake of persuasiveness. "I think she needs to quit the music school," suggested the stepmother one day. "Amalia spends too much time on nonsense, and her studies suffer. I honestly think that under the guise of the music school, she's hanging out with a bad crowd. I talked to the music school teacher, it's nothing but skipping classes." As usual, Leonardo agreed with Iris. Her words always carried decisive weight. When the man informed his daughter that she would no longer be attending the music school, Amalia immediately understood whose doing it was. For the first time, the girl openly objected. She was defending the cause of her life and, therefore, suddenly became bold and resolute. "No, I don't want to quit the music school. Iris just wants me to spend more time at home and do all the housework. I cook, clean, and do the laundry. I'm like a servant here when you're not around. See?" Iris looked at her husband, appearing distraught and concerned. "Do you see how she reacts? I'm just teaching the child the value of work. Nothing special. In all normal families, children have some small responsibilities. But all Amalia wants is parties and freedom. It's dangerous at her age. Look at your own daughter." Amalia couldn't hold back. She exploded. This played right into Iris's hands. She portrayed herself as an understanding woman who wasn't offended by a temperamental teenager, but only worried about her, wanting what's best for her. Amalia had tried to complain to her father about Iris before, but he didn't take her words seriously. How could he? His new wife was just so perfect. "You're just jealous," Leonardo stroked his daughter's head. "I'll try to pay more attention to you." Whatever Amalia said, it sounded unconvincing because her father was constantly being manipulated by Iris, the experienced puppeteer. And after this open quarrel, Amalia believed that her words no longer held any value for her father. By the way, Amalia did have to leave the music school eventually, at her father's insistence. She lost her only escape. Of course, she played for herself from time to time. It was the only way to relieve the constant stress she was now under. From time to time, Iris would pit father and daughter against each other to reinforce her influence. She played people like chess pieces. Leonardo was under the spell of his charming wife. He was firmly convinced that puberty had turned his sweet daughter into a monster and thanked fate for providing an experienced and attentive woman by her side during this difficult period. Initially, Amalia still tried to reach out to her father, but every time she did, Iris devised something new. One day, Margarita took money from the family savings. Amalia knew about this because she overheard Margarita asking her mother for money for a trip with friends to a resort town. Her mother had refused, explaining that she didn't like the girls' company, but Margarita was not accustomed to being restricted. She went where she wanted, which infuriated Iris. She scolded her daughter over the phone, threatened her, and ordered her to come back immediately. Of course, Margarita had no intention of obeying. That was not her personality. Of course, both Iris and Amalia knew where the girl got the money from Leonardo's savings. But when their father returned, the stepmother blamed Amalia for everything. Margarita was already home, pretending to be an exemplary high school student. She had acting skills that surpassed even her mother's. Her father didn't scold her then, no. He talked to her for a long time, trying to find out why she needed such a large sum. Maybe you got into trouble? Maybe you need help? Amalia tried to explain to her father what was really happening. He clung even tighter to her, as if in great pain, and begged her not to deceive him. Tell the truth, he implored, holding his daughter's hands. What's happening to you? Amalia said nothing more. It's pointless. Father considers her a difficult teenager, capable of theft. What can you say here? Iris's words turned out to be a powerful tool. The man doesn't trust his daughter, but he believes every word of his wife, and the girl couldn't do anything about it. Time passed. The moment of Margarita's admission to the university was approaching. Amalia realized that the girl would fail miserably. She wonders how the stepmother will explain this to her father. After all these years, she had been working hard on the image of her daughter. Iris's stories, Margarita appeared as a smart, diligent student, a talented girl. Iris constantly compared the girls, and Margarita always outdid Amalia in everything. But it's okay, Iris convinced her husband, since I raised one girl so successfully, I'll manage with your daughter too. I know how to raise girls. At a certain age, they need a firm hand. The father agreed with Iris and gladly handed over all the rights to raise Amalia to her. You know better how to do it, he replied to his wife. Amalia, she somehow got used to this life, reproaches, mockery, indifference, shifting most of the household responsibilities onto the shoulders of a teenager, restrictions and everything. Sometimes Amalia felt like Cinderella. Iris was a textbook stepmother. They say, fairy tales lie, but they hint. And then, in the absence of her father, Victor started visiting Iris. A young man, stylishly dressed, always smiling and polite. The woman explained to the girls that he was her distant relative. But Victor looked at Iris with such eyes that Amalia understood the stepmother was lying. Margarita didn't believe her mother either. She smirked every time this guest appeared in the house. Now Iris could afford not to come home to spend the night, and Amalia understood perfectly well what was happening. She wasn't a little girl anymore. The stepmother had a lover, this very Victor, young, handsome, charming, head over heels in love. It hurt the girl for her father. He trusted his wife so much, and the girl also tried to understand why Iris needed this man. After all, the stepmother didn't do anything just like that. If she brought someone closer, it was only to get something from him. So Victor appeared in Iris's life not by accident. Although, maybe it's still about feelings. He's a handsome man, reminds of the guys in magazines. Even Rita looked at him in a special way. Amalia tried to convey to her father what was happening. She cautiously told him about the man who sometimes came to their house and about Iris's increasingly frequent absences. Father frowned. Are you telling the truth? Are you not trying to tarnish Iris's reputation again? You two are always arguing. Dad, it's true, the girl almost shouted. She felt that her father didn't fully believe her, but she had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Of course, Leonardo talked to his wife. She spun some story about a relative who had come for a short visit from another city, and then began to complain about Amalia again, saying that she constantly lied and argued with everyone just to express her protest. Leonardo didn't know what to do. He should leave his dream job again and return to the mainland. However, now it would be even more difficult. After all, he was not only supporting himself and his daughter, but also 2 other people. He had taken responsibility, so he had to provide for the family properly. Alenka was completely at a loss. Maybe she needed her father by her side. But how could he leave the ship? Earning pennies was no longer an option. Iris. Enchanting, delightful, intelligent, sophisticated. Leonardo lost his head over this woman at first sight. They met at a mutual friend's anniversary, and then it turned out that Iris and Leonardo could help each other. It was like a puzzle had come together. At first, Amalia was thrilled with her stepmother and stepsister. Her daughter's eyes sparkled with happiness. She was so happy that Iris and Rita moved in with them. Then, when Leonardo went on a flight, he was at ease, his daughter was in good hands. Coming home also became much more pleasant. It's such happiness when your beloved woman eagerly awaits you, and she's such a beauty. Leonardo forgot what it was like. He envied himself. And then this notorious transitional age of Amalia began. The child seemed to have been replaced. The girl now was lazy and sullen. She lied and skipped her lessons, tried to quarrel with the stepmother and father. She made up lies about Iris and Rita. She reacted inadequately to ordinary requests, and once she even took a decent sum of money from the family savings. It's interesting, what did she need that money for? Leonardo was afraid that his daughter had gotten mixed up with a bad crowd. Especially since Iris thought so too. Amalia constantly complained about her stepmother. It's not surprising, she was raising her stepdaughter, limiting her freedom, and, horror of horrors, making her clean up after herself. It's much nicer to laze around all day, not bother with lessons and household chores, and live for one's pleasure. Of course, Iris was now a hindrance to the girl, so she was irritated. Leonardo understood that, but he didn't know how to help his daughter get through this difficult age with minimal losses. He never really understood Amalia anyway. It's a pity that they don't give you an instruction manual on how to raise a child. And now Amalia has completely crossed all boundaries. She hinted that Iris had a lover, some Victor. His wife didn't deny that some young man came to their apartment. Indeed, her relative, who had recently moved to their city, came to visit them. A busy young man who still hadn't found time to get to know Leonardo. He works a lot, trying to make his way in life. But Amalia, she insists that Iris is a lying monster and that Victor is her lover. Leonardo looked into his daughter's honest eyes and was horrified. Had Amalia become a slanderer and a deceiver? It didn't seem like her at all. That's when the man decided to install a hidden surveillance camera in the apartment. He would set it to record. The videos would be streamed to his phone in real time. On his next visit, he would provide Amalia with evidence. She would see the recordings and understand how foolish and ugly her attempts to blacken Iris were. Maybe something would click in her mind, and she would come to her senses. Nothing sobers you up like seeing yourself from the outside. Leonardo didn't expect to see this at all. At first, he still felt guilty spying on his family, as if he didn't trust them. It's not good, no doubt. But the recordings streamed by the camera turned his entire consciousness upside down. Iris was really treating Amalia like a servant. She looked at the girl with contempt, made her work for the whole family. And these were unbearable tasks for a teenager. Amalia didn't just clean up after herself and perform simple tasks. She maintained cleanliness throughout the house, scrubbed the plumbing, cooked lunches and dinners, and received only reproaches and insults in return. No. When Leonardo was at home, Iris didn't behave like that. The man couldn't believe his eyes. His heart was bleeding when Amalia appeared before him in the role of a powerless Cinderella. So Iris really lied. She was lying to him all the time with those honest and devoted eyes of hers. And Amalia. How many times she had tried to reach out to her father, and he didn't believe her. What a horror. Poor girl. If he could, the man would overcome hundreds of kilometers right now and protect his daughter. After all, with his own hands, he had made his own child's life a nightmare. And the girl had turned to him for help, but Leonardo didn't believe her. His daughter's words seemed like pathetic excuses. Amalia's stories about Victor were also confirmed. Indeed, a young man would sometimes come to their home, and he hugged Iris in a decidedly non-relative manner. Sparks were flying between Iris and Victor. The cameras turned out to be of high quality. Leonardo heard every word the couple said. Victor turned out to be an experienced and quite expensive lawyer. Iris definitely couldn't afford his services, so she went the usual route. She used her strongest charms. Yes, Iris and Victor were lovers. The young lawyer was undoubtedly under the influence of the woman's natural magnetism, and she, of course, had her own goal. Very soon, Leonardo understood what it was. A plot of land in village. Leonardo's mother left the house and garden as an inheritance to her granddaughter. Iris knew about this and was looking for a way to sell the property. She needed money. Margarita, the woman's own daughter, wouldn't qualify for a university scholarship. The girl had never burdened herself with studies, and miracles, as they say, don't happen, so Iris needed a substantial sum to cover Margarita's education expenses. The woman knew very well that no matter how much Leonardo was in love with her, he would never agree to such a thing, so she needed Victor. As Amalia's guardian, Iris had the right to manage the stepdaughter and her property until she reached adulthood. The woman was planning to execute a scheme, sell the house and village, and use the proceeds to pay for Margarita's education. But Leonardo must not find out about this. Victor, as an experienced lawyer, was helping his lover with this matter. Iris knew how to manipulate people like no one else. Realizing what was happening, Leonardo clenched his fists in powerless anger. Amalia couldn't be left alone with these horrible people. There was still plenty of time left in the voyage. It would be difficult to cancel the business trip, but Leonardo would do it. Amalia was in danger. Amalia was holding back her tears with all her might. She couldn't afford for Margarita to see how hard it was for her. She and her mother deliberately pushed her to the breaking point. The girl had caused ugly scenes in front of her father before because she couldn't keep it all inside. This played into the hands of her stepmother. Now Iris accused Amalia of vagrancy. The stepmother was diligently portraying her as a wayward daughter, a troublemaker, a lazybones, and now, on top of it all, a runaway. Amalia had just spent the night at a friend's house. She had informed Iris about it over the phone. "Do whatever you want," Iris indifferently replied over the phone. "I don't care." Of course, she didn't care. The day before, Amalia had cleaned the entire apartment and prepared meals for a couple of days in advance, otherwise, her stepmother wouldn't have let her leave the house. When Amalia returned home in the morning, she found police officers in the apartment. At first, the girl thought it had to do with Margarita. She often disappeared at night, and Iris occasionally had to rescue her daughter from trouble. Look who we got here." The policeman clarified with a raised voice towards Iris, who was hysterical. She nodded. And then the girl understood what was going on. Her stepmother had reported to the police that her underage stepdaughter didn't come home to spend the night, even though she knew perfectly well where she was. "I told you that I would stay at my friend's," Amalia said in amazement, glaring at her stepmother. The girl had already figured out that the woman had come up with a new way to portray her as a difficult teenager, this time involving the police. "You're lying again." The woman sobbed. What am I supposed to do with you? One more stunt like this, and we'll have her registered, warned the government representative as he left the apartment. Registered. Perhaps the stepmother was aiming for just that. And now Amalia was trying not to cry, curled up on her bed. She hugged the teddy bear that Senor Saiz had given her a long time ago, realizing that she would once again be portrayed as a lost girl in front of her father. And he, as always, would unquestionably believe his wife, looking at his daughter with sad, worried eyes. That gaze, full of pain and disappointment, was so difficult to bear. Suddenly, the key turned in the door. Amalia startled. Who could it be? Margarita and Iris were at home, and her father would be at sea for another 3 weeks. Could it be that Iris had given her Victor a key? Just no way she did. But her father's voice echoed in the hallway. I'm home. You're back? So soon? Iris's voice sounded confused and simultaneously overly cheerful. What a joy! I know everything. Her father clearly didn't share his wife's enthusiasm. I saw and heard everything. Pack your things. You have until evening. You won't do anything more to my daughter. Anything. Amalia's heart raced like a caged bird. She rushed into the hallway and hung onto her father's neck. How did he find out about everything? Amalia would figure that out later, but right now it didn't even matter. Leonardo held his daughter in a strong embrace. He smelled of the sea. Everything will be fine now, the man reassured her. Forgive me for not believing you. I won't let anyone hurt you ever again.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.